Copilot podcasts. Every click you've made, every search you've run, every app you've opened at 2 a.m, right now, somewhere, that data is being stitched together into a version of you that's making decisions about your life, your credit, your job applications, your future, and you were never in the room. Today, we're getting into AI ghosts, specifically what digital footprints actually are, how machine learning turns them into predictive models, and what that means for your privacy and your rights. By the end of this episode, you'll understand how this process works, why the scale of it is genuinely alarming, and what frameworks exist to push back. My co-host has been deep in this research, and I want to start with something that I think will reframe how you think about every app on your phone.
So let's start with the phrase digital footprint, because I think most people hear that and think, oh, like my Instagram posts or my Google searches, and that's part of it. But according to research on AI behavior prediction, the raw material for these models includes historical user interactions, demographic information, and contextual data, things like the time of day you're active, your location, how long you hover over something before clicking. It's the texture of your behavior, not just the content.
Wait, so it's not just what I post, it's how I scroll?
Exactly. And that's what makes this so different from what people imagine. The data collection is happening at a level of granularity that most of us don't consciously register. And the scale is the thing that Stanford HAI's Jennifer King keeps coming back to. She put it plainly, it is basically impossible for people using online products or services to escape systematic digital surveillance across most facets of life.
Basically impossible. That's not a small claim.
It's not. And King made this point in a white paper she co-authored for Stanford AI called Rethinking Privacy in the AI Era. The argument is that AI systems are so data hungry and so intransparent that we have even less control than we did during the earlier decades of internet commercialization. We had less control then than we thought, and now it's gotten significantly worse.
So what are these systems actually doing with all of that data? Like, what's the end product?
So this is where it gets genuinely fascinating and a little unsettling. There's a whole area of research around personality prediction from digital footprints. A Springer study explored how social media data can be used to predict psychological traits, things like personality dimensions, and there's even a field called explainable AI, or XAI, that's specifically focused on helping experts and individuals validate and question models that classify psychological traits from digital traces.
So AI is reading your personality from your posts?
From your posts, your patterns, your timing, all of it. And it's not just personality. A 2020-24 study published in the journal Mathematics by researchers at Xiamen University found that digital footprints are now being incorporated directly into credit scoring models. So the same kind of behavioral data is being combined with traditional credit data, like your FICO score, to predict whether you're a loan default risk.
Okay, I want to push back on that a little because isn't that potentially a good thing? Like, if someone doesn't have a traditional credit history, couldn't their digital behavior actually help them get access to credit they'd otherwise be denied? That's a real argument, and it's worth taking seriously. The Xiamen University research does frame it partly as a way to improve predictive accuracy for people who fall outside traditional credit systems. But here's the problem, and this is where the consent and bias issues come in. The data being used to make these predictions was often collected for completely different purposes. And when you repurpose data without people's knowledge or consent, you run into serious problems.
And we've seen that go wrong in a pretty high-profile way, right? The Amazon hiring story. Yeah, Stanford HI specifically cited this. Amazon built an AI hiring screening tool to help select job candidates, and they discovered it was biased against female applicants. The model had learned from historical hiring data that reflected existing biases, and it just reproduced it and amplified those biases at scale. And this is the thing, it wasn't a privacy violation in the traditional sense, it was a civil rights issue. The data was being used to make consequential decisions about people's lives, and the people affected had no idea it was happening.
That's the part that gets me. It's not just that your data is out there, it's that it's being used to make decisions about you that you can't see, can't contest, and didn't consent to.
Right. And that's what I'd call the ghost problem. The data you left behind takes on a life of its own. It becomes a model of you, and that model can be wrong or biased or outdated, but it's still making calls about your future.
So let's get into the mechanics of how this actually works, because I think understanding the process makes the stakes clearer. How does behavioral data actually become a predictive model?
So the process starts with data collection and pre-processing, gathering historical interactions, demographic info, contextual signals. Then there's what researchers call feature engineering, which is identifying which specific variables are most predictive. In a retail context, that might be purchase frequency or time since last purchase. In a credit context, the Xiamen University study used a technique called lasso logistic regression to select the key variables from digital behavior that most strongly predict default risk.
And then what? The model just runs on its own?
Pretty much. Research from Taras Shevchenko National University of Kyiv looked at machine learning systems for predicting user behavior, and they evaluated algorithms like decision trees, random forests, support vector machines, and neural networks. What they found is that these models can detect hidden patterns in behavior that humans would never spot manually. And once trained, they adapt in real time, continuously updating as new data comes in.
So the model is always watching and always updating. That's the ghost. It never stops.
Exactly. And the real-time adaptation piece is important because it means the model isn't just a snapshot of who you were, it's a continuously evolving prediction of who you're going to be. A streaming service segments users by viewing habits to predict what they'll watch next. A lender segments borrowers by digital behavior to predict who will default. The logic is the same.
Okay, and here's what I think is the most underappreciated part of this. It's not just about what you consciously shared, it's about what gets inferred. That's the inference risk, and it's one of the key findings in a Frontiers Journal review on AI and privacy. The review found that AI can be a threat to privacy specifically through inference, meaning the model figures out things about you that you never explicitly disclosed. Your political views, your health status, your financial stress, all of it can be inferred from behavioral patterns. And then there's the generative AI angle, which takes this to a whole other level.
Yeah, Stanford Hey AI flagged this specifically. Generative AI tools trained on data scraped from the internet can memorize personal information about people, and not just about you, but about your family and friends too. That relational data becomes a tool for spear phishing, which is the deliberate targeting of individuals for identity theft or fraud. And they noted that bad actors are already using AI voice cloning to impersonate people and extort them.
AI voice cloning to extort people. That's not a hypothetical, that's happening now.
It is. And this is why Jennifer King's framing is so important. She said that 10 years ago, most people thought about data privacy in terms of online shopping, like, I don't really mind if companies know what I'm looking for because it's sometimes helpful. But now, she says, companies have shifted to ubiquitous data collection that trains AI systems, and that has major impact across society, especially our civil rights.
The shift from helpful personalization to civil rights implications is a massive jump. How did we get here so fast?
Scale and opacity. IBM's analysis of AI privacy issues makes this point. As tools that enhance data collection and analysis advance, the likelihood that personal data appears where it doesn't belong increases. And the intransparency of AI systems means people have almost no visibility into what's being collected, how it's being used, or how to correct it.
So, what's the regulatory response looking like? Because it feels like the law is always playing catch up with technology.
It is, but there's real movement happening. The Freshfields 2026 Data Law Trends report describes data law as a global fault line right now. Divergent rules, intensifying enforcement, competing agendas across jurisdictions. They specifically call out algorithmic fairness as a growing issue, and they note that enforcement is more aggressive than it's ever been.
And there's been specific action on kids' data, right?
Significant action. The FTC finalized revised COPPA regulations, that's the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, requiring greater transparency and new data sharing limitations. And states are going further. California, Louisiana, Texas, and Utah have all enacted laws requiring app stores to verify user ages and implement safeguards based on that age. For the first time, app stores are required to tell developers how old their users are.
That's a pretty significant shift in how the whole ecosystem works.
It is. And states are also passing age-appropriate design code laws that require platforms to default to high privacy settings and limit data collection to what's strictly necessary. The McDermott Law Analysis of 2026 Data Privacy Trends describes this as a future where children's online experiences are shaped not just by data privacy rules, but by broader safety and consent standards.
Okay, but what about adults? Because it feels like the protections for people over 18 are still pretty thin.
That's a fair critique. The regulatory landscape for adults is more fragmented, but there are frameworks that give individuals a way to think about this. Atlan's 2026 data ethics analysis lays out what they call the 5 Cs: consent, collection, control, confidentiality, and compliance. The idea is that every data practice should be evaluated against those 5 dimensions. And the Frontiers Review points out that AI can actually be a tool for enhancing privacy too, through techniques like federated learning and differential privacy, so it's not all one-sided.
Wait, AI as a privacy tool? That's kind of a plot twist.
It is, right? The Frontiers Journal review specifically found that AI sits at both ends. It can be a threat through inference risks and data exploitation, but it can also be used to protect privacy through techniques that allow models to learn from data without ever directly accessing personal information. So the technology itself isn't inherently the villain, it's how it's deployed and governed.
That's an important nuance because I think the instinct is to just be scared of all of it, but the question is really about accountability and transparency.
Exactly. And that's where the explainable AI research becomes really relevant.
The XAI work on psychological profiling from digital footprints is specifically designed to help both domain experts and the people whose data is being used to validate, question, and improve these models. The idea is that if you can see how the model is making decisions, you can challenge it. Right now, most people can't see any of that. So transparency is the lever. If you can't see the model, you can't contest it.
That's the core problem. And it connects back to what the Freshfields report calls the fragmented global landscape for anonymization. Even when companies claim data is anonymized, the standards for what counts as anonymous vary wildly across jurisdictions. So your anonymous data in one country might be perfectly re-identifiable under another country's standards.
Your ghost travels internationally. That's a wild thought.
And gets interpreted differently at every border. The Freshfields report frames it as a geopolitical and commercial chessboard, nations and businesses competing over whose rules apply to your data, and the people whose data it actually is are largely not at the table.
Okay, I want to bring this back to something concrete because I think it's easy to get lost in the abstraction. What does this actually look like for a regular person going about their day?
So think about it this way. You apply for a loan. The lender uses a model that incorporates your digital footprint, your browsing patterns, your app usage, maybe your social media activity, alongside your traditional credit data. The Xiamen University study showed this kind of model can improve predictive accuracy, but you have no idea which variables were used, whether the model was tested for bias, or whether the data it trained on was collected with your consent.
And if you're denied, you don't know why.
You might get a generic reason, but the actual logic of the model is opaque. And that's the Amazon hiring situation all over again. Consequential decisions being made by systems that can't explain themselves, using data that was never meant for that purpose.
And the data ethics framework, the 5 Cs, is that something individuals can actually use, or is it more of a corporate compliance checklist?
It's framed for organizations, but the questions it raises are ones individuals can ask. Did I consent to this data being collected? Do I have control over it? Is it being kept confidential? Those are questions you can ask about every app you download, every platform you sign up for. Most people never ask them, but they're the right questions.
So the actionable thing is actually just asking the questions, being a more intentional participant in your own data story.
That, and understanding that the data you leave behind isn't neutral. It's being actively interpreted, modeled, and used to predict your future behavior. The Springer research on personality prediction, the Xiamen credit scoring work, the behavioral segmentation research, all of it points to the same thing. Your past digital behavior is being used to write your future.
That's a genuinely unsettling framing. Your past is writing your future, and you didn't get to proofread it.
And you might not even recognize yourself in what it wrote. Because the model isn't you, it's a statistical approximation of patterns in your behavior. It can be wrong, it can be biased, it can be based on data that's years out of date, but it's still making calls.
So when you step back from everything we've covered today, the personality prediction, the credit scoring models, the inference risks, the regulatory scramble, what's the through line here?
The through line is the gap. The gap between what you think you're sharing and what's actually being collected. The gap between what you think the data is being used for and what it's actually being used for, and the gap between the decisions being made about you and your ability to see, contest, or correct them. Jennifer King at Stanford HAI said it plainly. We have even less control than we did before, and AI is making it worse.
And the regulatory response is real but fragmented. the FTC, the state-level AADC laws, the Freshfields report on global data law, there's movement, but it's uneven.
Uneven is the right word. And the Freshfields report makes the point that businesses are discovering yesterday's compliance playbooks don't work in today's environment. The rules are changing fast, enforcement is getting more aggressive, and the stakes, financial, civil rights, personal safety, are higher than they've ever been.
Here's what I keep coming back to, though. The Frontiers Review found that AI can be both the threat and the solution, inference risks on one side, federated learning, and differential privacy on the other. So this isn't a story where the technology is purely the villain.
Right. The XAI research, Explainable AI, is genuinely promising because it's trying to make these models legible to the people they affect. If you can see how a model classified your psychological traits or your credit risk, you can push back. Transparency is the mechanism that turns a ghost into something you can actually interact with.
I love that framing. Transparency is what makes the ghost visible.
And the 5CS framework from Atlan's data ethics work gives you a practical lens: consent, collection, control, confidentiality, compliance. Every time you're about to hand over data, those 5 questions are worth running through. Not because you'll always have good answers, but because asking them puts you in a different relationship with the technology.
So here's what this really comes down to. You are generating a predictive model of yourself every single day through your searches, your scrolls, your app usage, your timing, your location. That model is being used to make decisions about your creditworthiness, your employability, your personality. And most of the time, you have no idea it's happening.
And the model doesn't stop when you do. It persists, it travels, it gets interpreted differently depending on where in the world the data ends up. That's the ghost. It's not haunting you, it's actively representing you in rooms you've never been in.
So what's the one thing you'd want someone to walk away from this episode actually doing differently?
Start asking the consent question. Before you download an app, before you sign up for a service, ask what data is being collected and what it's being used for. Most people skip that step entirely, and given what we now know about how digital footprints become predictive models, that skip has real consequences.
That's a genuinely actionable place to land. And I think the bigger shift is just recognizing that your data isn't passive. It's not just a record of what you did, it's a living model of what you're predicted to do next.
And that model can outlive your actual behavior. You might change completely, your habits, your finances, your personality, but if the data that trained the model is old, the ghost is still the old you. That's the part that should make people want to understand this better.
We started this episode by saying that a version of you is making decisions about your life without you in the room. And now you know how that version gets built, from your clicks, your patterns, your timing, your behavior, assembled by machine learning systems using decision trees and neural networks and lasso logistic regression into something that looks like you, but isn't quite you.
And the good news, if there is good news, is that the tools to make these systems more transparent and more accountable do exist. Explainable AI, privacy-preserving techniques, the 5Cs framework. The question is whether the regulatory pressure and public awareness catch up fast enough to make them the norm rather than the exception.
That's the open question, and it's a big one. Thanks for being here for this one. And if this episode made you look at your phone a little differently, good. That's exactly the point. You've been listening to Copilot Podcasts. The ghost is real. Now you know how to see it.